Right, good evening everybody and welcome to the Executive Board meeting for November. Mel, can we begin with apologies for absence?
Thank you. We have apologies from the following non-members of the board: Councillors Clatworthy, Grady and Wright.
All right, thank you. Declarations of interest? Okay, we'll move on. Minutes of the previous meeting, I'm happy to propose those as a fair record.
Happy to second that, Leader.
Thank you, Aaron, that's great. All right, leaders' announcements then. So firstly, I wanted to thank all councillors and officers involved in the recent Corporate Peer Challenge. I appreciate that it was a lot of work for some, quite a lot of work for others, and I don't know that anybody was completely untouched by it. I think, you know, a lot of people were interviewed and spoken to, as well as a lot of our partners, as I understand it. The initial feedback was very positive, as we shared on the day, and Vic, who of course does these peer challenges from the point of view of being on the other side of the fence, and also Paul, were happy to say that it's probably about as good as it gets in terms of the feedback that we had. We're awaiting the formal report and we'll share widely in due course. The second point I wanted to make was, as part of a planned transition, I'm handing over my place on the Health and Wellbeing Board to Dan Birch, Councillor Dan Birch, given Dan's role of Executive Board Member for Wellbeing, Social Mobility and Transformation. That's part of a planned handover that we agreed about a year ago. It's been a real privilege for me to serve on the board and to be part of the setting up of the District Collaborative within the integrated care system in Worcestershire. Now a quick advert on behalf of Councillor Rick Deller. The Affordable Homes Summit is coming. It will be Wednesday the 27th of November, 1 o'clock to 4:30 in the committee rooms. We have some members, I'm pleased to say, from the Conservative group coming already, and I think a number from the other parties, which is good, but we would love to see more people there. So if anybody can make it, please put that note in your diary. But my thanks to Rick and to Jen and her team for putting that together. I think it should be a very useful exercise for us. Today we had the Local Democracy Day here, and a number of you, I think, who are here now were present, and I just wanted to thank you again for coming, and for those who are not here for coming. This year we had 5 schools present. The last time we had 3, so we were up by 2 schools. Prince Henry's, TDMS, Pershore High School, the Vale of Evesham and Droitwich High School were the newcomers. And you probably want to know who won the debate. And in the end, we decided we would need to have 2 winners. We had one team that we felt completely did a fantastic presentation, and that was Pershore High School. Once again, they really aced it. And we did feel that the Vale of Evesham as well had an incredible message, and they put it over very, very well. And we think that there's quite a lot that we need to reflect on in terms of what they said. So we're going out and looking for another trophy to be produced by our trophy provider. And I think, you know, it was in all other respects a very happy day. And I think I think we all felt that the standard was just excellent, you know, in general, not just the winning schools, but all those who came really gave a great account of themselves. I think probably the most phenomenal thing about it was that once again, Councillor Rob Adams was, you know what I'm going to say, he was elected Prime Minister of Wychavon. This is not the first, not the second, this is now the 3rd time running. Despite some very good challenges from our younger members, they did their best. I have no idea. Well, I do have some idea what Rob does right, but we looked, there was no chocolate passing hands, there was no bribery. He just did a great job. So well done, Rob. You've got some magic there, which we could all learn from, I think. So with that, I think we will just go on to item number 5, public question time. Do we have any questions from members of the public, Mel?
No, we have no questions.
Okay, so we're now into the presentations by the advisory panel chairman. This is something that we do once a year, so I look forward to hearing from them. Councillor Emma Sims, looks like you're going first. Communities and Funding Advisory Panel. Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you very much. for preparing the slides for the communities and fundraising advisory panel. So I think this is a great panel, actually. We have a very good panel of councillors and co-optees who all take the challenge of looking at the projects very seriously. And I hope that looking at the slides we'll see some really great projects that have been awarded funding. So we have 6 councillors, 3 co-optees, Rob Whittaker, Sarah Lawler and Alex Sinton. Strong support from lead executive board member, Councillor Rob Adams. Thank you, Rob, for your support. 3 main areas of focus are community funding streams, community engagement and support, and overseeing delivery of relevant promises. We do have links with the other 2 panels as we cover communities across Wychavon. £1.4 million plus funding is recommended. Over 976,000 community legacy grants over 6 projects. 78,000 Section 106 contributions for 5 projects. Over £352,000 of UK shared prosperity funding over 11 projects and organisations.
Do you want to explain what's in the pictures?
Yes. In the pictures that we have are some of the projects that have been awarded the funding, and I'm afraid I can't read that. My apologies. No, that's fine. So in the first we have the Pinvin community celebrating their 134,000 community legacy grant for upgrading the nearly 100-year-old Pinvin Memorial Hall, Pershaw Health and Wellbeing Hub, and one of the UK SBF recipients. In September, we did a tour of 6 of the projects previously funded. Here are 3 of those that we visited. Top left is my patch, Broadway Youth and Community Centre, supported through a CLG, Community Legacy Grant, to the Parish Council of £150,000 for the building and £10,000 towards a comprehensive youth programme, which is working incredibly well. So thank you for that from my heart, from Broadway. Top right, Broadway Museum and Art Gallery, who were given £7,000 from the UK SBF to help with supporting the community with accessible and interactive museum experiences. At the bottom is Evesham Baptist Church Community Centre in Offanem Road. Evesham Town Council were awarded £40,000 new homes bonus from the new homes bonus under our previous scheme, which was spent on the kitchen at the centre. We have visited that, as you can see, and it's amazing. It's an amazing centre, actually. Assets of community value. We've considered 4 nominations, recommended listing 2, Broadway Bowling Club, Chapman Court in Pershaw, recommended not listing 2 that we considered didn't meet the listing criteria. Meet Your Council programme, received an update on the programme so far, discussed ideas about future events, and pleased to all councillors talk to Tracy Perkins about getting involved. What's next? Community Star Awards, launching in spring 2025. We Are Wychavon plan promises, community-led rural transport, Ticket to Ride Fund, presentation of research results in January 2025, looking at neighbourhood plans and community resilience plans, including meeting your council programme, parish and town council engagement, and considering what's next for community funding. And is
Thank you very much, Emma. Now, any questions from the board on any of that, or from anybody else? It all looks a very, impressive lineup of things that we've done again with the money that we've had available. It looks like it's been well used. I think we've had a discussion that's been along the lines of maybe it's going to be difficult to find more really great ideas out in the community going forward. Maybe we've reached the point where parishes and so on, if they're going to do something, they've already gone ahead and done it, and those that are left perhaps just don't have the capacity to do it. Is that something that you think is the view of the people on the committee, or how do you feel about it?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think that's always a challenge. We've had some absolutely great projects and great initiatives up to date. And yes, I think it is open to debate as to what projects will come through that will match that criteria. But I think that's not to dismiss small little projects. I think it would be interesting to look at different areas of the district that perhaps haven't received any type of awards, and they might be small little projects. So I think that's something we will take on board. But there is, I think it's worth just looking at, how we can approach those smaller parishes, I think, in the future. Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Richard Morris.
Thank you, Leader. Some great initiatives and great projects that have been carried out, and it's something I think we're all very proud of and want to cheer about, really, because it does make a difference. But I also think it's so important to carry forward. We know that we still have heavy house building in the area, and we know that we lack infrastructure, and a lot of the infrastructure that we lack is very much on communities, and knitting communities together and really celebrating communities is a massive part that we can play. So I would urge that we continue to do something on similar lines.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, I agree. Absolutely.
Thank you. Any other comments from anybody? Oh, Rob Adams, Councillor.
Thought he was going to say. Yes, I just wanted to say a big thank you to Emma, and when she took over that job, by Jove, she was very professional about her first meeting and ever since. So she has been an excellent chairman. I mean, with the CLG and the amount of money, just take the CLG, over £5 or close to £5 million we've spent on some wonderful projects through, and the time Emma's been dealing with the chairmanship, she's made an excellent job and never sent me off with any recommendations to the boards which were outrageous or silly. They debate things extremely well and are very conscious of it, the public money they're dealing with. I just would like to add the commitment of the members, very much backed up by Tracy, to do and conduct their business very professionally. And with the CLG grants, of course, that doesn't or isn't decided on just one meeting. And it's so important that once they go down that line and dealing with the community legacy grants over the years, all the members have to attend all of the meetings. There's quite a lot of reading towards that. So well done, Emma, for what you've done and continue to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. I think we'd all agree with that. Thanks, Emma. That's great. So, Councillor Linda Robinson, to talk about the rural panel. Welcome.
Right, evening everyone. So, on to rural matters, which, as we know, are of vital importance to Wychavon. The vast majority of our population actually live in a rural or rural-related area as defined by DEFRA. And we are the second highest rate in the West Midlands. And I'll say it now, because no one might ask, but in case someone asks, the highest is Stratford-on-Avon. And this shows that rural matters are also important for people who live and work in our towns. There's an interrelationship between the two. 9 very active panel members who are passionate about championing rural interests, including 3 co-optees, as listed, and thank you to them for their valuable contributions, which are on a voluntary basis. We also welcome observers to our meetings. We've had a parish councillor attend who want to see how we operate, and all and any members are welcome to come along. So a list there of our topics and speakers to date. Our work plan was agreed in 2023 based on evidence and panel member input. It's been regularly reviewed and most recently to take account of the new We Are Wychavon strategy. So as it says, we've had John Campion, included a focus on communication of key rural crime messages, including through WhatsApp and parish councils. Councillor Roger Phillips, some of you may know from Herefordshire Council, and he's the chairman of the Rural Services Network, which included action being taken by them to lobby parties on key rural issues in the lead up to the general election. And our own new Director of Planning, Ian MacLeod, invited shortly to come to us after taking on his role to talk about how the planning process can support the rural economy and vibrant rural communities. Done that one. So during 2023 and 24, the Rural Matters Advisory Panel has been administering the Wychavon Rural Fund, a combination of Rural England Prosperity Fund and UKSPF. This is capital funding for businesses and community groups in the rural parts of Wychavon, everywhere that isn't one of the 3 main towns. And it shows there a significant capital of nearly 820k and plenty of businesses and community groups supported. I'd like to thank the funding subgroup made up of councillors and co-optees who put a lot of time into reading and considering applications, and thanks to Emma Ridley and Georgie Muckle for supporting such an effective grant funding programme. So we also went off on a tour recently and toured a number of rural grant funding projects in the north of the district. From the left, we have solar panels and batteries at Cutnell Green District Memorial Hall. Top right was electric vehicle charging equipment at Fuse Marquees. Bottom right, a new kitchen facilities at Tiverton Village Hall. Bottom left, solar panels and batteries, reducing the cost of ventilation and cooling at Fibden Farm. And this just gave us a small insight to the businesses and community groups we've been able to support through the funding, and the panel were able to see thriving rural businesses and communities and the real impact that the panel has been able to have thanks to the allocation of funding. And at forthcoming meetings, we're looking forward, as on the screen, and we at Wychavon promises that are specific to the rural areas will be particularly important to us. So this presentation was a very high-level sprint through the work of the panel over the last 18 months. I welcome questions and comments outside of this meeting or within, and for any of you to come along to one of our meetings to find out more. And finally, my thanks to Jen and Tracy as our officers who support me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Linda. Comprehensive report. Does anybody have any questions based on that? Well, are you feeling confident about the lineup that you've got coming ahead? Do you think there's enough to go through? It looks a pretty full list there. Particularly the youth facilities, I imagine it's going to be quite a challenge. I know our budget is small.
I think the beauty of the rural panel is we don't have to have huge budgets to discuss and take these matters on board and offer help and support. It's not just about financial support, it's putting it out there and talking about it and making them feel empowered. So I like that idea. Thank you.
Thank you.
And if there is still some money, that would be great.
Absolutely. No, I think you make a very good point. I think signposting is always key, isn't it, with all of the parishes that we've got. But a fantastic looking set of pictures and ideas and amounts of money that you've handled. You know, that's a lot of groups to deal with, 54 or more. So thank you very much for doing all of that.
And thank you for giving us the opportunity to showcase it. Oh, Margaret.
I noticed that the work plan priorities include water management. Does that include wastewater management? Because I think there's quite a lot of problems concerning that in the rural areas.
I couldn't disagree with you there, Margaret. So if it doesn't, it should. And we'll talk about it. Thank you.
Councillor Birch.
Thank you. Yeah, really detailed report. Thank you very much. In regards to the rural health and wellbeing hubs, obviously, especially in this time, our farmers are under increased pressure and ever increasing pressure. I know that you've obviously met with Hayley Corbett, and she's recently been going to cattle markets and things like that. Would sort of integrating more with the health and wellbeing team be something that the panel would be interested in doing to help pursue that goal of attracting more parishes and community groups to set up these rural health and wellbeing hubs, especially to support our farmers?
I think it's a great idea, and we know that there's significant mental health issues for our farmers and their families, so that could all come in together. It'd be very useful. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I'm encouraged to see in our report that we've identified 4 of the 5 rural areas that we might have health and wellbeing hubs. I'll come to that later. Thank you very much, Linda. That's great. Thank you. Excellent. So, next up, Councillor Mark Googe for the Town Centres Advisory Panel. Yeah.
That one. Yes, that's the right button. Good. Excuse me, well, I've got a frog in my throat, so if I cough, I apologise in advance. Sorry, no, it is literally a frog in my throat. I have not got lurgy, honest. Yeah, okay, right. So, now, this is something, you've just heard Linda tell you that 97% of residents are in rural or rural-related areas, but that does include the towns themselves. Most of the towns fall within definition of rural related because we are very close to the rural areas and we have a lot of interaction with them. So these two figures do not disagree with each other. There is a significant overlap. But the reality is that, as it says there, nearly half, it's actually about 46% according to the latest census. Nearly half of Wychavon's residents live in just 3 towns, Droitwich, Pershore and Evesham. So, and those towns are also important retail, service and hospitality hubs for the surrounding villages and rural areas. So the town centres matter, not just for the people who live in those towns, but also for the people around them. And that is the main focus of the town centre panel. So who we are, we're made up of 3 different types of members. We have councillors, the co-opted members, and the place board representatives for each town also attend the town centre panel. And each of those groups represents each of the 3 towns. So there are councillors from all 3 towns, co-opted members from all 3 towns, or at least there will be when it's full. At the moment we have a vacancy. And the place board representatives, obviously there is 1 for each town. So there is this trio of trios all the way through this theme of the town centre panel that it all links in together and links out also to the other panels. And we regularly, as it says there, we regularly get external organisations come in to give presentations or lead discussions. For example, we have recently had presentations on things as diverse as signage in the town centres. We're starting off a car parking review. We'll come to that in a subsequent slide. But a significant part of the town centre panel's work is taking presentations from external groups and from offices on subjects that are relevant to the towns and deciding where to go with those, whether to work them up into a recommendation to bring to the exec board or kick them into the long grass, which we sometimes do. Not everything needs to be dealt with immediately. One big difference between us and the other 2 panels that you've heard so far is the town centre panel doesn't generally deal with funding. Funding for the town centres is primarily channeled through the place boards, so it has a slightly different focus. Our responsibility is more to coordinate things between the various agencies that deal with the towns. Okay. So our key themes are retail economy, visitor attraction, town centre accessibility, and that looks a lot better on that screen than it did when I looked at it on my iPad just now, which is really, I'm really pleased about. So we go through those in detail. Retail economy is an absolutely key one. We get regular reports from Steve and I about the vacancy report and empty units. I'm not expecting you to read that thing at the bottom right of the screen. That's an example of the kind of data report that we get quarterly. The town centre panel has been involved in handling the shopfront improvement grants, which have been they've been making a difference already in the town. Certainly in Evesham, where I live, I can see the difference when I walk past some of the shops that have already had them, and I understand we've had a similar response from elsewhere. And generally, the visual enhancement of the retail streets, it's an important, making it a nice place to be is one of the key aspects of the town centres. Okay, town centre accessibility, as I said, we've recently had a signage audit, of which you can see the photo there is the cover page of that report. We have just kicked off a car parking review, which will hopefully report back in the not too distant future. Car parking is absolutely crucial to the town centres, particularly given that they are the centres for the retail, for the rural areas around them. You can't, public transport is not as good as we would like it to be in this area. So particularly for people in the villages, to be able to get into the town centres and go shopping, they've got to be able to park somewhere, where the car parks are, how much they cost, how convenient it is to get to them. These are all key themes for the panel. Accessibility for wheeled users is another important one. We've been looking at pedestrian and cycle links between residential areas and the centre, and there was also a report, we've had a report on how easy it is to get around town centres if you are disabled, which matters a lot. It's you tend to think maybe that it doesn't matter to me because I'm not disabled, but we all have the potential to become disabled as we get more elderly, and with an ageing population, of which Wychavon does have an ageing population, accessibility of the town centres is a key factor. Okay. And then visitor attraction. Events and festivals tend to be focused around the towns. It's really important to make sure that Wychavon supports these, gives them the backing that they need, and helps them out where we can with publicity, with investment into them. There are grants which go into various festivals, and making the most of our natural and historic features. For example, Droitwich's canal area and the Salt, which we're still working on, and Evesham, obviously, the River Avon is an absolutely crucial part of the town's attraction. Every Saturday afternoon and Sunday afternoon, it's lined with Brummies who come down to fish in the river, and in summer with the boating activities. These are all a key part of what the town centres are involved with, and the panel has a huge role to play in helping to coordinate Wychavon's response to this and the way we feed into that as a council. And getting the word out, the council has our media department, PR department, call it what you like. I'm not sure what our official title is. Comms department, there you go. That's the word I was groping for. And the council can help with the events in helping to get that out in the place, because we have professionals who are good at that kind of thing. And sometimes the events organisers, they're good at organising events, but they're not necessarily good at putting together publicity. So our publicity helps with all of that. Okay. So that's about it for the town centre panel. I'm happy to take any questions, should there be any.
Thank you very much, Mark. That was a great presentation. Enjoyed that. Covered a lot of ground. Looks like you've got a few questions, though. So we'll start. I think, Dan, you were just in... I think you were ahead. I'm going to go Dan and then Richard.
Thank you, and thank you, Mark. A couple of questions, if that's okay. I'll take them one at a time. In terms of the Shopfront Improvement Grant, a couple of the comments that we've had back, or that I've seen on Facebook and other platforms, are around how narrow the area in which we cover with that grant is. So a couple of shops who fall outside of that area, why aren't we included? From the Town Centre Advisory Panel's perspective, Do you believe that we're getting it right with that grant? Are we targeting enough businesses? Are we getting enough? Are we getting enough responses and feedback from local businesses?
That's a very good question. It's partly is we have to start somewhere, and with a limited budget, you start on what you believe you can afford. If it's successful, then expanding it out. But the town centre panel does focus very much on the town centres. I mean, I don't know where I don't know so much about where it is in the other two towns, but certainly from Evesham, I know that we get a lot of people in the Port Street area saying, why are we not eligible for the grants when the High Street and Vine Street is? But the reality is that the budget currently doesn't extend to that. And also, High Street and Vine Street and Bridge Street, it's only a few shops that need it. In Port Street, we could probably do the whole street. So it's possibly a very different project. But yes, it is one of the things that is important to review, and extending it is one of the things that we have been asked.
Brilliant. And then just in terms of the empty unit report that you're getting back, from your perspective, so we're at a point in Droitwich, for example, where we nearly had every shop in the high street filled, and unfortunately we've just taken a small turn and a couple of empty shops have found their way in. I'm sure they'll be occupied soon. But from a vacancy perspective, obviously the council don't have direct control over who takes up these units or whether they're taken up at all. But is there any more, once again from the town centre advisory panel's perspective, that the council need to be doing to attract businesses into these empty units and trying to get them fulfilled so we have full shop fronts as opposed to empty windows?
That's probably more of a strategic thing, because we can't directly control who comes into individual units, but we can make the towns an attractive proposition for inward investment. That's probably more at board level than it is at town centre panel level, because we're talking about things like Waitroses and the Raven and the Riverside Centre and things like that. Getting those into town, dealing with the big issues in the towns are the things that attract other businesses into the towns. And certainly I'd hope the town centre panel has an input into that, but it's a much higher level than us.
Brilliant. And then finally, and I've partially got to say this because Councillor Morris is sat next to me, but in terms of the prospectuses, how big of a role do they play in directing the work that the panel do?
The prospectuses are more relevant to the place boards than the panel itself. The place boards are a part of the panel. Certainly when the prospectuses first came out, they were a key part of what the panel has done. The prospectuses now are due for a revamp, and I would hope that the panels, are they not due for a revamp? Well, possibly due for a refresh, and the panel may well have a role to play in that. But certainly the prospectuses have a big input into what the place boards do, and the place boards are a key part of the panel.
All right, that's the case for the defence. And no, Richard, after you.
Thank you. Yeah, the town prospectus are still very valid and still have a lot of support and work in terms of the vision of the towns. We need to be working on the game changer sites, but the place boards, I think, are doing a superb job. First of all, well done, Mark, and thank you for that. You had a tall order taken over from the previous chair, who was superb. So I know how difficult it was, and you've done a brilliant job. How important do you think it is having the place boards reporting into the town panel?
I think it's absolutely essential. We've set up the place boards to provide this kind of third-party approach to the town centres, and without their position to come into the panel and report to councillors, because one of the things we get in, obviously everybody's entitled to come along to it, any of the panels, but we regularly get a full house of Evesham, Droitwich, Pershore councillors, even the ones who are not on the panel, coming along to the meetings, which can sometimes mean we get a little bit shoehorned into the conference room, and people are kind of clinging on around the edges. But being able to sit there and talk to the place board representatives, both the officers who provide place board support and the place board chairman or whoever comes to represent them is absolutely essential. It's a vital line of communication between the councillors and the place boards, and make sure that we're all on the same page when we're going forward with what we're doing. And we take back what the place boards bring to us, which we then take out to the town councils. Yes, the short answer is yes, it's an absolutely vital means of communication between us.
And do you think it becomes a good forum for sharing best practice and good ideas between the three different towns from that perspective?
Yes, it does. I mean, there's some things that have been going on over in Droitwich that I've been thinking, that could be useful for Evesham at some time, and I've been taking a couple of those back to the town council that we could possibly look at doing, and seeing how things have worked out between them. So yes, I certainly see it's very much a case of pollinating between the three towns, if you know what I mean.
Well, thank you, Mark. That was a really good presentation. Thanks for those clarifying questions. I think just in terms of the prospectuses, and this might be a confusion that I possibly started in a way. If it was, I'm going to confess now. But with our group, I wanted us to get together to talk through and look at the prospectuses again, partly because we've got councillors who weren't around when they were written. So they were written, obviously, towards the middle or the back end of the last administration, and I think as a result we've got some people who perhaps don't, probably haven't picked them up and looked at them. They might not be the ones who are involved in what you're doing, but I just want to get everybody up to the same sort of baseline. I think what Richard's saying is, in my view, probably right. I'm not sure that anything has changed massively in the time frame, and so hopefully, it's not a case of it needing a rewrite. However, let's walk through the pages and talk through them, talk about the game changer sites. My observation, I must admit, and I think, as you say, it's a very crowded room, and I don't want to sort of tread on anybody's toes. I went earlier on to quite a few of the meetings, and I was really impressed by it all. I think the ideas that we're getting from the three towns, and as you say, the fact that we're getting different ideas from different people, it's fantastic. I mean, I think there's a natural tension there sometimes in terms of we're dealing with individuals who are in the private sector. They feel like they should be able to, get something done within 6 weeks, and we'll be saying it's more like 6 months or something like that. For I think all of the right reasons, but that is just the difference between working in a world where you're working on private land and doing what you want to do for your business, and when you're working in a public space and doing something for residents and so on, you probably just have to be more consultative, and there is a slower process basically. But that's something that I think we can defend. I think what does seem really great to me is that we've got those ideas and those people still working at it, and I would like to pass back up our thanks to them through you for everything that they are doing. Thank you.
I think maybe it would actually be worth our while putting the prospectuses onto an agenda item at some time next year, and asking the responsible board member maybe to just brief the panel on them, because I think, as you say, there are people in there who don't really know anything about them, and maybe putting them on and having a presentation on what they do and what their role is within Wychavon and the towns would be useful.
Thank you. We'll run with that one. Super. Thank you very much. That brings us back to Councillor Emma Sims again. So coming forward to talk about the Natural Capital Panel, and that's our last one.
Thank you, Chair. The Natural Capital Panel, previously the Carbon Reduction Panel. I'd like to think this is a sort of a newer version. I'm not going to say a step up, because it obviously isn't. It's just a newer version, and we've met twice, and I think we have lots of thoughts and ambitions that we'd like to take forward with this panel. I think the scope, I hope Ian will just touch on that at the end, I think is great, actually. It's a broad brush. The Natural capital panel is, I think, an informative panel in terms of how it sits within Wychavon and its key priorities of people, place, environment, commitments. I'd like to think the panel will shape ideas for future projects. The remit for the panel is to look at areas of certainly the Wychavon's Intelligent Green Plan and define areas with the specific goals of the panel and look at these priorities and promises and go through these key points with officers on the projects that encompass the list of priorities. And I think the idea of this panel is that the outcomes of these projects could then be recommendations for the executive board. We've had some fantastic speakers, so thank you to the officers that have pulled these speakers forward. Steve Bloomfield, who's the Conservation Officer from the Worcestershire Wildlife Trust Natural Networks. I'd just quickly like to thank Councillor Hardman for her support as the portfolio holder. So thank you, Beverly, for your support. Steve Bloomfield. So that was really interesting about the natural networks. I didn't know a lot about it. And this is the Trust looking at creating a network of wildlife-rich habitats across Worcestershire and looking at blue-green infrastructure, an acronym, BGI, which is a network of natural and designed features that can provide environmental benefits and improve quality of life, which I think is great for all of us. We've had an interesting presentation from Matt Barker, the Carbon Reduction Manager, about the EV charging in the county and how we probably will be looking at where the county councils fund the local electric vehicle infrastructure fund to install, hundreds of charge points, rapid charge points, hopefully, in Wychavon as well across the district. And these charge points are to specifically serve residents who don't have their own off-street parking spaces. And this has the potential to include public car parks. Ian has given us an update and presentation on Evesham Pershore decarbonisation plan, and the council has appointed specialists to help take this project forward. We've had Liz Etheridge giving a presentation on the biodiversity action plan and species mapping and the many iterations of that, and is now to consultation. Liz has been very busy as an officer, she is also going to talk to us, bring forward the local nature recovery strategy. And we have Joe Weldon, the Carbon Reduction Projects Officer, who will be talking about the active travel plan. And I think the panel's role in supporting the We Are Wychavon and how the panel will help overseeing delivering of our promises for the future. And I'd just like to ask if Ian would just give, if that's okay, his idea on scope for the panel.
Yeah, I think you've given a really good overview of how the panel's evolved from one that was largely focused on carbon reduction to one that is now natural capital to include biodiversity in particular. I think Emma's identified the Natural Networks project as one that I'm particularly proud and fond of, having funded through SPF. And should we be fortunate enough to get future SPF funding, I think is a little bit of a no-brainer to support activity like that, given the investment it puts in communities for benefit for all of us. I think Emma may be underselling the impact that the group's had, actually, that the We Are Wychavon plan, the wetlands at Broadway, that was sort of reflected on and started in a conversation at the panel. So I think it's had a direct impact on what we are now putting as a priority. A large hectarage of wetlands. In terms of the future ambition of the panel, there is going to be a review undertaken, and it's going to be a review of the Intelligent Green Plan. It's been incredibly successful. It's shaped a lot of what we do, a lot of our ambition. it is time for a review. There probably are too many actions in it. But I think the panel will seek to grab hold of that and shape something that's relevant for the next probably 4 years of our intelligently green, carbon reduction, biodiversity improving activity.
Thank you, Ian. That's great. Now, any questions from anybody on the panel here, or from you, Margaret? No? Okay, Dan, I'll let you go.
Thank you. Well, as the former chair of the carbon reduction panel, I think I better say something. So when I was chairing it, the big thing that we were pursuing was the SALEX funding, and for the leisure centres, for the decarbonisation. Matt, Ian and Jane worked incredibly hard on getting that funding and ensuring that we keep that funding so that we can get those projects off the ground. Before then, it was the covers for the pools at the leisure centres to try and reduce carbon from that way. So is there anything now that the Natural Capital panel are particularly pursuing, or any projects that you're looking to get to the exec board, or are you currently focused on the Intelligently Green plan, which rightfully, as Ian said, is quite probably in need of review?
Thank you, Councillor. I don't want to say anything at the moment because I am not au fait with it. You know, I have 2 meetings, so I don't want to preempt any ambitions that we have. But I think certainly I know that we, as I mentioned, you know, the Intelligently Green plan is something that we should look at and define areas. And I think that's where I'm going to leave it, if you don't mind. Thank you.
I mean, I think the only thing I would say is that we've got environment as one of the core 3 strategies that we have. There are 10 items in there that all relate to different things that you could bring back to that panel. And I think now that we've got, which we'll be coming on to later, you know, an enhanced quarterly reporting set up with some commentary, I think those things really probably do need to be looked at, and particularly at your panel, by the group in the panel, because I just think there's going to be too much data otherwise, if it's not being reviewed at a lower level. I mean, the exec board will obviously look at it. Beverly will speak to us about it, but I think there are just going to be so many pages in that report. I think we're going to need to sort of have a lower level group, I feel, to look at the details. I think it's something that we should be ambitious about. I mean, as you said, we've got a rural area. Carbon is not going to be sufficient. If we solve that, we'll just find that we're on to the next problem, and biodiversity is a massive problem. You know, do you only need to read any paper to sort of understand that we're up against a crisis if we don't solve them? We need to solve all of them, and we need to work together to do that. I think what will be great is if we can find things that do unite communities. So we were obviously at meeting with Broadway and Wickenford and so on the other night, and what was interesting is that they are all linked in a way by the river system and the worries of flooding, along with traffic. You know, it's always another common problem, but actually on this occasion I think it was trumped by concerns about flooding and so on, and I think it is a theme that we can use which will have a direct link, if you like. It's only a private view, I suppose, but my slight worry when I read commentary about all of this is that we've gone from a phase when we thought that climate change was the thing that we needed to worry about to now being in a world where we're contemplating whether or not we do or should worry about it a little. And we obviously, I mean, we are saying we do need to think about it, but we need to make sure that people feel that there are practical things they can do. And I think what's happened is that the narrative has been allowed to develop where people feel that there isn't anything they can do. And as a result, there's a sense of, well, if I can't do anything, then I'm not even going to try. And that's a fatal thing for us to allow to grow in our communities. And I think if we can link flooding, which is something that impacts people directly, has impacted them a lot in Wychavon, to the wider natural capital debate, then I think we'll start pulling those 2 views, if you like, together. Beverly?
There's been quite a lot of work going on. I mean, recently we've got the carbon waiting for the reduction with the swimming pools having a new system put in, but we've been spending a lot of time with the biodiversity, partly because the county have had a big project we've had to feed into. So some of the things are very related to the county, like the charging of vehicles, they're looking at getting funding for loads of charging of vehicles. So we're having to work with them because sometimes district are going forward and then we find that county got money which we then have to backtrack slightly because they've got the money for it. And with I mean, if you look at other councils, county councils, they already have funding for electric charging points. We are now beginning to hopefully get a grant shortly in our county. So we can't always go ahead with something we think as a district we're going to do because county council are doing it. And that has happened a couple of times recently. Separately, because the names of the panels change, we are going to just have a quick look at the panel, purpose of the panel, and see if there's any changes needed for that. We'll come back to council if that happens.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for that. Right, if there are no other questions, I think we'll move on. Thank you very much, Emma. That's super. Thanks. Right, if we move on through the agenda, the next item is the budget. That's on page 13 for those of you who've got your iPads open, and I'm going to ask Councillor Erin Powell to take us through it. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader. So this is the second stage of our sort of three-stage process of setting the budget. At the last meeting, we agreed the broad parameters that we would use in establishing the budget for next year. At this stage, we set out how we will work with partners in delivering certain elements of the budget, or certainly in securing some of the income associated with the budget. We set out a revised budget for the current year in order to establish a firm baseline that we can work from looking into the next year. And we publish the draft budget for next year, taking into account the parameters that we set at our last meeting. In terms of the current year, there is a good news story in that we are projecting a revised revenue budget of 11.6 million, but overall a greater contribution to reserves this year, largely as a consequence of additional income received in the form of interest, which we'll talk about perhaps on the next report. We have had a very good year in terms of our investment returns. We are, however, also proposing now, or forecasting now, a £23 million capital programme this year. And I would say that is a very substantial capital programme this year that is significantly dependent upon capital receipts. And I'll perhaps come back to that in a moment. In terms of the draft budget for next year, applying the parameters as we have them and applying what we know now in terms of the monies that we are likely to receive from central government, we are again forecasting a surplus budget next year. That is based upon our current position. As yet, we have not received a settlement from the government for next year. We are likely to receive that in mid-December, and of course once we receive that we will be able to then firm up the proposals for next year. We are also expecting at some point, probably in the spring, a multi-year settlement from the government. It's been promised for many years. The government has indicated that it will provide a multi-year settlement probably in the spring. However, we do not yet know what that will look like, and there are certainly some indications that that multi-year settlement may see greater provision of funding for what are called Tier 1 councils, i.e. counties and unitary authorities, rather than district councils. So there are some significant challenges ahead, and I would draw attention, if I may, to paragraphs 3.8 in the report and then subsequently to 3.3. In paragraph 3.8, you'll see that whilst we are forecasting at this stage a surplus budget for next year of around 3.4 million, we then, based upon what we know right now, forecast a deficit budget every year thereafter for the next 4 years. And in the context of a very substantial capital programme this year, as I've already talked about, that picture for the next 4 years, based upon what we currently know, I would urge caution. I would suggest that we need to be very careful about where we are allocating additional funds and be very cautious, certainly in terms of committing to further capital projects. As a result of that, you'll see that paragraph 3.3 commits us to reviewing how we operate and to seeking to build a transformation programme in the early part of next year based upon the settlement that we receive for next year and the multi-year settlement that will follow, in order to ensure that we do have a resilient financial position over the medium term. As it stands right now, we're in a good position, but we can't sit on our laurels. We do need to think very carefully about how we operate and how we spend money to ensure that the solid reputation that this council has of having very sound money management is one that we are able to maintain for the future. That said, Leader, there are 3 types of recommendation in the report. Paragraph 2.1 makes recommendations for the Executive Board to approve, those relating to how we consider pooling for the purposes of business rates and how we support our parish and town councils. Paragraph 2.2 asks the Executive Board to recommend to Council the amended budget or the revised budget for this year. And paragraph 2.3 asks the Executive Board to consider, along with the Audit Committee and the Overview and Scrutiny Committee and Council, the draft budget for the coming year. So those items, if approved, will be taken forward to the next Council meeting and to the various meetings of those committees as we seek to establish the budget, which, as always, we will approve in February next year. With that, Leader, I commend the report to the Executive Board.
Thank you, Aaron. Any questions before I second this? Anybody? You know, I think Aaron has outlined very clearly the, if you like, the position that we are in. We are in a secure position if certain things come forward for us, but there is a complete lack of certainty about that once we go beyond the next 12 months, in my view, in that we'll have a 1-year settlement and then we'll find out more. My concern is that the current government has settled disputes with major parties without necessarily asking for any re-engineering in return as to the way they operate. And we have to recognise that what we do as a council, perhaps unlike, not unlike the county council, but I think we in particular are responsible for cost avoidance, really. If we have nice environments for people to live in and grow up in and work in, if we've got good leisure facilities, if we've got roads that work well but are also not right on top of the housing that is close to them, we'll end up with a healthier, more resilient population. And so cutting our funding, I think, would be a massive mistake. I think maybe if there's one other action that comes out of this for me, it is that, yes, we can prepare for what we're given, but I think we also need to prepare a case for saying what it is that we deserve. And I think that's a separate question altogether. I think what we deserve is possibly even more than we are given. I think our budget is very small relative to the county, and what we deliver actually makes a huge difference to residents and makes a big difference to whether or not people choose to come and live here. So we need to put that positive case, I think, and ask for a wider assessment, really, of the benefits of the work that we do. But that said, otherwise, I'm very happy to second what we're proposing here. This is us responding to the current situation in a proactive way, I think, and in a sensible way. So with that, I'll ask the board if they're in favour. Please show.
That's unanimous.
Thank you, Misha. And we'll go on to the next item, which is Aaron again, the Treasury Management Mid-Year Update.
Thank you, Leader. So, as you'll be aware, this is a regular report that we receive that identifies how our investments have performed during the course of the previous 6 months, and indeed how we have performed against the benchmarks that we set ourselves at the beginning of each year. And I have to say, as I've already indicated, it is a very good news story. We anticipated return on investments, interest return on our investments this year of about 4 million. We've actually, we're now indicating that it is likely to be in the region of £6 million that we will receive in interest on our investments. So a very good return indeed. And on all of the benchmark measures that we use, we are performing either at the benchmark or within the range of the benchmark that we set ourselves, or in one case, actually better than we had set ourselves in terms of the benchmark. So overall, a very good position. And therefore, I commend the report to the Executive Board.
Thank you. I'm very happy to second that, and I think we should pass on our thanks, as always, to the team that works on enabling this to happen. Are there any questions from anybody? No? In that case, all those in favour?
That's unanimous.
Thank you, Misha. Right, next up, we've got the new We Are Wychavon 6-monthly performance report. Councillor Dan Birch.
Thank you, Chairman. So this report's just for noting, but just to highlight a couple of things as we go through it. So the report has taken a new form that is off the that is feeding back from the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. So if anybody has any questions or queries about what's in the report, then I'm sure Sherry will be more than happy to provide any background information to any of those and further assistance. Just to go over a couple of our promises. Obviously, as you'll see, most of them are in the green. I think this is to be expected. We're only 6 months in. I think if we had a lot of ambers at this stage, we'd be incredibly worried. So I think that's as expected, and hopefully we'll keep as many of those green as we possibly can within our ambitious plans. So from my own portfolio, I'm incredibly glad that we've identified 4 potential locations for rural health and wellbeing hub offerings, and that's a credit to David Manning and his team who have been able to go out and find those within our community, and it puts us well on track within to achieving our goal within the next 4 years. We've obviously kicked off construction within Willow Court in Droitwich, which has also allowed us to pursue other ambitions in terms of attracting veterans into working opportunities and similar initiatives. So we've done a really good job with that project, and Jane should be incredibly proud of the work that the team has done in getting that off the ground. Financially, we're doing, as Aaron has pointed out, comfortably, so there's no real cause for concern then. And then Ian McLeod isn't here, but I do think it's worth pointing out some of the comments within the planning and infrastructure section. I think our planning team has taken a massive turn, much for the better. The work that the planning team are doing now with Ian McLeod as Director of Planning, with Carl Brace and Kieran Powers, they're doing an incredible job of turning that team. Members are getting more support in dealing with applications that are coming forward in their ward, and we are getting a better turnaround. We're getting better comments from developers who are now receiving more timely replies from planning officers, and the planning committee are receiving far more support from Carl, Kieran and Heather. And that's also helping us now get down the number of appeals that are being overturned. As you can see, there have been a few. It is rising, unfortunately, and that is down to our 5-year housing land supply. But due to the training that the planning committee has now undertaken, I believe that number should start coming down, as we are now only refusing the applications that we do have solid grounds to refuse. So we should be a lot stronger when they come to the planning inspectorate. But the planning team are doing an incredibly good job, and I think we should be incredibly proud of the change that's been seen in that department over the past 12 months. Just in terms of the number of complaints that we're receiving, we're currently averaging only around 1 a week, which for a council of this size is an incredibly good result, and I think a credit to our services teams and the work that we're doing across the district. So overall, it's an incredibly positive report with no real concerns. So I'm more than happy to move that we continue as are and continue the good work. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Dan. Councillor Rick Della.
Thank you, Leader. First, I'd like to thank Jerry for your work on this, and you can see how hard the work's gone into that. So I want to thank you for that. I think what is good is the fact this one also highlights the business as usual stuff. I think it's often overlooked, the day-to-day work of our officers, and you'll see from the report that while the work hasn't increased, the level has stayed the same, and that is a high level, and it shows the high demands that we place on our officers, who work extremely very well towards that. So I think that should be duly noted. I would like to pull out 2 promises, and sorry, Leader, unsurprisingly they are housing. But I've mentioned this before, that one of our promises was to hire an empty homes officer, which makes us the only council in the county to have one, and one of the only in the country. She's already hit the ground running, and is already bringing in ways to try and bring these houses back to life. The other is is around temporary accommodation. We have an officer in place, and we've already brought 2 temporary accommodation properties back to life in Droitwich, which was somewhere we really needed it. I had the pleasure of visiting this and speaking to the officer who put the work in on this, and spending any time with her. You could see the passion that she has for her job, and she told me the story that the person we've put in there was a rough sleeper for 3 years. He is now in a warm, safe environment, and gives us our officers time to work with him to get him back on his feet. I think if our promises are to do anything, they are to make our lives of the residents better, and there's no more clearer evidence than that. And we have committed to bringing on at least 15 more. Leader, I am very happy to second these.
Thank you very much, Rick and Dan. I mean, for all of those good news stories, I think it's very easy to, as councillors, sometimes feel a bit browbeaten, and I'm sure as officers too, by the things that are urgent and going apparently wrong. But in reality, there's an awful lot that is going right, and I think it's the strategic things that are going right, basically. We've taken strategic decisions to focus on things like empty homes, to focus also on the financial impact of people who are struggling with their housing bills. We've got a financial inclusion officer also in the housing team. I think these things are all about cost avoidance, and the full cost benefit of it, if you like, is often a bit hidden, because if we hadn't had them, those costs would have swung out somewhere else into society, whether it's in a GP surgery or in a hospital somewhere, or in care for somebody who hasn't got a home or anybody to look after them anymore. So I think we're doing the right thing. We should feel confident about it, and I think we've got to put those positive business cases together. But thank you to Sherry and team for getting a much improved report together. And as I said, I think that we've now got enough detail in there that we should look at it really closely, not just within the exec board, but also within the groups that report into the exec board. Okay, we don't have to do anything other than note it, so we'll move on to number 10, which is parking on Crown Meadow, Evesham. And Councillor Richard Morris to introduce this one, please.
Thank you, Leader. On Crown Meadow, I'd like to put forward the recommendations in 2.1 and 2.2. So 2.1, the Executive Board approved the removal of charges, initially for a 12-month trial period. The Meadow's been closed for vehicular traffic on the 29th of September and hardly opens during the time. So Crown Meadow sits within the functional floodplain of the River Avon, and as such is subjected to frequent flooding. Last winter saw repeated episodes of flooding, and the pay and display machines, which were already rotting away, are now not functioning at all due to the amount of flooding. And they're not even serviceable by the manufacturer, and that would, if they were, that would add even more cost. The new machines don't have a pedestal mount, meaning they are more susceptible to flooding in the first place, and therefore likely to be written off more easily due to flood water. So it's a car park. It's really well suited down by Abbey Park, so it can still be used for events and supporting events. But the rest of the year, it tends to be affected badly by flooding. So we want to take away the cost that it incurs by trying to maintain that car park as an active car park. And we'll do that for a trial period.
Thank you, Richard. Now, I know that there were some comments at the group meeting that the Conservatives held about this, and to be fair, there was some real disquiet and I think worry about what this might mean for the town going forward. And Councillor Mark Gooch, I don't know if you wanted to add anything or say something about it. I know you were one of the ones who was particularly concerned, and then we'll see if anybody else has got any questions. Mark?
Yeah, I have a couple of potential issues with it. One is that obviously Crown Meadow is a very well used recreational area. If parking, as well as people generally only park on there when they're using it for recreational purposes. They don't use it as a car park to visit the rest of the town because it's a slightly further walk than the town centre to car parks. There's no point paying the same price to walk twice as far. My concern is that if parking on it becomes free, it will become the default long stay car park for the town centre during the summer months when it's open to parking. And therefore, not only will that reduce its value as a recreational area, because you'll get a lot more cars on it, meaning less space for kids to kick footballs around and play frisbee and whatever, but it will suck away revenue from our own car parks in the town centre where the charges will still be levied. So my concern is that it will cost more than just the free parking on Crown Meadow, and it will cause more issues than it solves. As I said at the group meeting, I think we should look into moving the pay and display things to closer to the entrance where they're above the flood zone, or possibly just even going for app-only payment on there. But that's my suggestion anyway.
And my comment back was, what about, an app or some kind of recognition? But you still have to have an installation there, and that installation will still be subject to flooding. It just is in a territory or an area that does not support any infrastructure to put pricing against it. I would say, let's go with the trial, and it's something we can revisit. We've got the car parking review anyway, which we can consider, whether there's warrants any use of it at all.
Thank you. Now, if there's one thing I do know, the subject of parking can lead to endless debates, and it might not be an appropriate use of time. But I think I just wanted to make sure that your thoughts were reflected. I think, as Richard has said, we'll trial it. It's good to experiment. We may have got it wrong. We'll be the first to admit if we have. But if we haven't, then we'll learn something. And I think we just need to be prepared to share the results, regularly as we go forward, and hear from the local councillors too.
Just something else I did ask. I said, could we just use it for coach parking? But again, because it floods and the ground gets saturated, it doesn't support that. But coach parking needs to be part of the parking review as well that we're undertaking.
Okay, so with that, if there are no other questions, I think I am happy to second that, and we'll go to the vote. All those in favour?
That's unanimous.
Thank you again, Misha. Right, Lido Park, Droitwich Spa, Beverley.
This is, I'm really pleased this is happening. This is going to be a new water park to replace the current one in Droitwich, which is over 10 years ago we put it in. That would mean that it'd be a brand new one like we have in Evesham and in Pershore. However, the theme will be relating to the local area. It's going to be about £550,000. We hope to get it open by next May, and it will be in the park, not in the Lido, so it'll be free access to people to come and use it. This is separate from what's going on in the Lido itself. People have great use of the ones we have in Evesham and in the new one in Pershore. It's well received. People love it. Personally, I might say hands up, grandchild absolutely adored it. Parents struggled to get him out of it, the play area. So it is loved by children alike. And not all councils do this. It's an amazing thing that we do. And I think we take it for granted what we do, but actually we should look around the country and realise how special we are, because very few people do this sort of play area. So I'd like to propose it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Dan Birch.
Thank you, Leader. Absolutely. Evesham's had a new one, Pershore's had a new one, and last but certainly not least, Droitwich will get a new one. And it has two benefits, really. First of all, it frees up the bit of space that we do need for our incredibly ambitious Lido project, which is currently in consultation. So it does free up that area at the back of the Lido to ensure that we have the space that we need to deliver on that project. The area that we're looking to move it to is the dip at the side of the tennis courts, so it will provide a real community feel to that area of the park. You've got the playground, followed by the football and tennis courts, and then you'll have the splash pads, and you've got the pathway that goes around all of that. So it really will encapsulate the centre of the park and bring it all together. Some of the frequent complaints that we have about the one in Droitwich is the size of it, and the fact that it's enclosed means that when you get kids playing and parents on the side, it can get a bit cramped. You'll get parents getting wet because there isn't enough room to stand away from the splash pad area. So by opening it up a little bit, it will be better for the visitors that come and see it. Within the report, you'll see it hasn't had any upgrades since 2011, so it is certainly overdue. Hopefully, we'll see some ambitious designs coming out soon, and I think part of the hope with that is that we'll encapsulate some of Droitwich's history within the new splash pads, and it will be a really ambitious site and truly round off the park as we make some really big and important improvements to the Lido and the Lido Park as a whole. So I'm more than happy to second that, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Exciting times. Any other questions or comments? Councillor Morris?
Thank you. I totally support this, and it is something that we've been looking at for some time. I remember seeing a visual in previous years, and the description has a similarity to those visuals where there may be a kind of river flowing down the bank area and some rocks, and it will be really good to regain those visuals, because I think they will excite and motivate everyone, because it has a lot to offer, does this?
Thank you, Richard. Anybody else? I'm looking forward to our exec board meeting being there at some point. I'm just warning everybody, you'll have to bring with the appropriate kit. But no, it sounds great. Thank you very much. So, all those in favour?
That's unanimous.
Lovely, thank you. Right, so moving on now to Parks and Open Spaces security improvements. Councillor.
I'm really pleased by this one. It's something that I had a conversation with officers quite a long time ago, and I'm glad to see papers come forward. It's to make our parks and open spaces, not just our parks, to deter vehicles we don't want them. And we've had a lot of incidents where people go on the parks, we don't want them, then they leave. We've got to deal with the land that they've ripped up because the vehicles have ripped up the land. So this is putting £250,000 to use. It will be each area that we consider we need to put these security enforcements in will be looked at. It might be rocks, it might be wooden posts, it might be metal posts, but we will make sure that the type of security put around these areas fits into the surrounding areas. And there'll be one big budget for it, because we don't want to put a budget in for each park or each area. And the money will be looked at by each time they spend it by the Capital Projects Board, who will check how it's been spent. So I'd like to propose this, please.
Thank you very much, Beverly. Councillor Rick Della.
Thank you, Leader. Yeah, happy to second. I think we talk a lot about our parks and our green open spaces a lot, whether it just be how good they are, whether it be in planning. So protecting them seems a very sensible and straightforward idea. So I'm happy to second.
Thank you, Rick. Any comments from anybody? No? Oh, Councillor Googe.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just say, from an Evesham perspective, this will be very much welcomed by local residents. I mean, I'm fortunate in that there are no parks in my ward, so I'm not the one who gets the phone call when it happens, but I know that some other councillors, it can be incredibly difficult having to deal with the deluge of complaints from residents when park or open space is occupied by unwanted visitors, and dealing with this will be very welcome.
Thank you, Councillor Googe. That's good to hear. Right, in that case, we'll go to the vote. All those in favour?
That's unanimous.
Thank you very much. Right, item number 13, path improvements, Pulley Lane, back to Beverly Hardman.
I think we're glad to know it's my last one. This is a path improvement for Pulley Lane. It's only for the lane. It floods around the whole area, but we are wanting to sort out the actual lane and make it accessible. There have been some fantastic photographs, if you haven't seen them, showing how bad the water is on the lane, and the local residents cannot use it. So this is to make the path usable. So we're on to asking for £90,000 to do this project, so make the path better, but it will not be anything to do with any other water around the area, just the path. I like to make you realise, but it is well worth doing. It is used a lot, this path. It is keeps people away from the road, so I'd like to propose it, please.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Richard Morris.
Yes, this is my district ward, and it's been an ongoing issue for some time, and I really appreciate the work that Jane and the engineers have put into trying to help bring a solution, because the residents that back on to the pathway, have suffered for some time with water coming off the road onto the pathway into their gardens. So by trying to raise the pathway, which the money will go towards, and putting a small bund in, that will help alleviate, we hope, some of the pressure, perhaps with some shrubbery growth as well on the side. Highways as well are working on some of the issues on the road side, but this will, I'm pretty sure, go a long way to enabling that path to be walkable during the depths of winter and the worst weather. This pathway is so important because Pulley Lane itself has no path. So this is the path that pedestrians use to get from the new house building on Yew Tree Estate all the way up to Worcester Road to access services, bus routes. So when it's at the height of winter and it's impassable, they cannot make those journeys at all, or have to be really kitted out in order to do so. This will help immeasurably.
Thank you, Richard, for that explanation. Any comments or questions from anybody? I think this is a really good thing for us to be doing. It's going to enable people to engage in more active travel. Fabulous. Right, all those in favour?
That's unanimous.
Okay, in that case, we're on to item number 14, references from committees. So the Communities and Funding Advisory Panel, 16th of October 2024. I'll hand over to Councillor Rob Adams.
Thank you, Leader. This relates back to an award in 2022, a CLG, where Pershore Town Council was awarded nearly £40,000, and basically was for a zip wire and trim trail. Well, like a lot of applications in that year and around that time, the costs of what different applications, increase so much, and so they've come back now to drop the, which is a little bit sad really, the trim trail, and just go on with the zip wire at a cost of 28,560. So that's basically what it's about. They've come back. They couldn't afford to do what they'd like to do, so they just go on. Perhaps we will see in time to come that they can get funding for the trim trail. So for tonight, I move the recommendation as printed to the Executive Board on the 20th of November this evening, that the request to change Pershore Town Council CLG project previously agreed in July 2022 from a zip wire from a zip wire and trim trail to just the zip wire in the sum of 28,560. That to be approved this evening. I move that, Leader. And we deal them separately?
I think, yes, we can do them separately. So thank you very much for that, Councillor Adams. So I'm going to ask then Councillor Rick Deller to second this one.
Yeah, happy to second.
Any comments, questions? No? All in favour?
That's unanimous.
Over to you, Rob.
Yeah, so a fairly simple one there, and we haven't got any photographs, but I assure you this application for Badsea Rangers Football Club for their change in facility, and they are very dilapidated, I must say, if you saw the photographs. And basically, this is a 106 application. I move the recommendation that up to £8,500 is allocated from the Section 106 contribution reserves to enable the Parish Council to install the change in facility at Sandy Lane Recreation Ground, Sandy Lane, Badsea, and B, to delegate to the head of Legal Services Authority to release the money to the Parish Council as required on receipt of satisfactory invoices. I move that recommendation.
Thank you, Rob. And Councillor Dan Birch?
Happy to second.
Thank you. Before we take the vote, I'd just note that this is Badsea Ward, and I'm pleased to say that Councillor Mark Ward, who's the representative for Badsea, is making a good recovery from his heart attack. I've heard from him today, and he is, in fact, potentially hoping to come to the full council meeting, which is a remarkable achievement. But I'm sure he'll be looking forward to get back to speaking to the parish council in Badsea and the residents there. So this is good news for them, and all those in favour?
That's unanimous.
Thank you very much, everyone. That draws the meeting to a close.